Hello again, and welcome to another episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. I'm your host and the editor of Guns Magazine, Brent Wheat. We've got another fantastic episode, very informative. I'm talking to Erick Gelhaus. Erick is a well-known instructor. He teaches at Gunsight Academy, and of course, he's also the editor at AmericanCop.com. Well, I had a very teachable moment today during a firearms qualification course where my pistol-mounted optic failed on me, and I had to use my iron sights as backups or co-witness along with the red dot optic. So Erick is the guy that literally wrote the book at Gunsight Academy on pistol-mounted optics, and we're going to talk to him today about what I did right and wrong when my pistol-mounted optic failed. But first, here's a quick word from our great sponsor, preparedness.com. Prepare for those just-in-case situations with emergency food kits from 4 Patriots. Their survival food kits combine great taste with long shelf life, making them perfect to stash away for any emergency situation. The folks at 4 Patriots set up a special page just for our audience, so you can get this week's special discounts and deals. That page is 4patriots.com/gunmag. Again, just go to 4patriots.com/gunmag for all the special discounts and deals. Well, good afternoon, Erick.
Good afternoon, Brett.
Hey, I appreciate you taking time out to talk to us here on the Guns Magazine podcast. And this actually, we have done zero show prep for this show because it was something that happened to me. Yeah, well, and that's different than how, but no, we actually literally, we're doing this one almost off the cuff. And it actually came, we were just in a meeting an hour ago, and I had to run from what's called my LEOSA qualification. And for those that don't know, when you're a retired police officer, honorably retired, you can remain qualified with your agency and you get a card. And it basically allows you to carry a firearm essentially nationwide. That's a whole nother topic. But basically, it's the retired officer's gun permit, so to speak. So every year you have to qualify. So I just got done doing my qualifying run, and I scored perfect, thank you. And I had to immediately jump in this meeting. Erick was there, and they asked, how'd you do? And I said, I did okay. The interesting thing, as you know, I am a fanatic now about pistol optics. After much whining and boo-hooing and fighting it, I finally made the switch, and it took me about a year to really get comfortable with them. And oh my goodness, I'm shooting better than ever because I can see the sights now. But I had one of the things that the naysayers and the people that don't like optics, I had it happen to me, and they're absolutely right. I had an optic failure. And actually, it wasn't a total failure. It was an intermittent failure. I don't know if the battery was going dead, the battery was loose. Don't know. But I started shooting my first string of fire, no problem. Second string of fire, I don't have any sighting. So what do you do? What do you do? What do you do? Well, what you do at that point is hopefully you can co-witness your sights on your pistol. And that's what we're going to talk about today. Erick, he's been on the podcast before. He's an instructor out at Gunsight Academy, and he literally wrote the new student manual on optics. And Erick's been using them longer than most folks even know about them. So he really is a subject matter expert. So let's dive right into it with really the big question. If folks aren't aware, what is co-witnessing of sights? Because I do hear a lot of people talking about it, and it doesn't seem like they really know what they're talking about.
So, like we talked about, I was surprised that folks hadn't listened to Pat Rogers on this, but then it dawned on me, we lost Pat almost 8 years ago. Yeah. So co-witness is the idea of aligning the reticle and the optic with the iron sights already on the gun, right? This could be on a carbine, could be on a pistol, could be on a shotgun. The problem with that is, for the iron sights to match up with the reticle, the dot, you have to have them sit real high. So one, that takes up a bunch of space in the window of the optic, right? It interferes with your ability to see things. The other problem is it can impact your ability to get holsters that will accept the pistol with sights that high. We were just talking about that. And this goes back to the carbine era, where what we saw in the M4 carbines and translated over onto the ARs was the idea of a 1/3 co-witness, where your iron sights wouldn't sit up more than about a third of the way into the window. And still, for me, that's still some space I don't want to give up. There's at least one company I deal with that's kind of gone to what I'd call like a 1/5 co-witness, where like the top of the front and rear sight are in the bottom 20th, right? The bottom 5th of your window. And that's actually where I prefer them.
Yeah.
Out of the way.
And that's the gun I was shooting, which I'm not going to mention what it was. I had looked at the Optic and looked at the co-witness. I hadn't really done a lot of work with it. It was a new gun anyway. But when I realized I had to do that, it was like, oh, perfect. Because there was just enough you could really make out, get your sight alignment through the window, but it didn't. When the Optic was working, you didn't really notice it. So to me, that's perfect. Now a lot of places are putting these suppressor height sights for that very reason. And, if the camera is your Optic, having something like that kind of gets in your way and defeats some of the purpose. So that whole having it down there, still visible, but not really occluding things. But so you're a big fan of just 1/5, 1/4 of the total Optic picture.
As low as I can get it in the window and still get a sight picture is where I want to be.
Yeah.
If we're taking advantage of it to where, it's giving us a better field of view, it's opening things up, and we're looking at what we're trying to hit rather than focusing on the sights, right, the reticle, then having those irons down low makes my life a whole lot easier.
Yeah. And you've been using optics a long, long time. On the street, you were a police officer. You retired from there. You've also served in the military, but you've been using, like I said, optics before a lot of people even realized they were a thing. And when did co-witnessing become a thing? Because I really became cognizant of it, 5, 6, 7 years ago. When we first started talking about optics, it wasn't even really a thing. And then suddenly everybody realized, okay, if this thing goes belly up, what do we do now? But when did that kind of all start? Or was it there from the beginning? I just didn't see it.
I think it was there from the beginning. Going back to like red dots on carbines. I had my first red dot on a carbine that I was using at work in 98, 99. And the early on the iron sights where the idea was co-witness them, like put the dot on the top of the front sight, right, and work it that way. Well, that started to get confusing, and now people spent time trying to line up the dot, the reticle with the iron sights, which defeats the whole purpose of using them. Early on with putting them on handguns, people were looking, because they sat so high, that was why we started to see the suppressor height sights. Well, people stayed with suppressor height sights as the mounts got lower, and that kind of put it into that co-witness realm area, I guess would be a better way to phrase it. The problem, though, is now you're trying to get people to mechanically and visually put the dot in the front sight post in the same place, which takes time and it gets cluttered. I try to treat them as their separate sighting systems, like we did on the carbine, right? There's the dot, there's the irons. You don't make them meet.
Well, I kind of already touched on it, this whole idea of reliability. And, again, I've kind of become an evangelist of pistol-mounted optics. But when you talk to guys that haven't done it, now I hear, yeah, probably should, but I just have a hard time with it. And, they do break. Let's put this in perspective. You teach these classes, both at Gunsight and other places. You've been using one forever. How reliable are optics now? And I will say the one that failed on me today is a lesser known brand, a more, shall we say, value optic. And I chose it for that reason. But I've got them all the way from the top end stuff to what this was. And it did fail. But I got to say, this is the first time I've had an optic fail on me, actually ever, when I've been shooting.
So I have had dots go down electronically and mechanically on me. I've had them fail because of switching, oddly enough, in a match earlier this year. But we don't see, at least in classes, in classes that I'm teaching, I am not seeing the dots break like they used to.
Yeah.
It used to be, it was not uncommon to see somebody to see one or two people in the class have broken optics during the week. Now what we see is mounting failures. Something in the way that the person mounted it is keeping it from holding up and lasting through the course of a class. Do they still break? Yeah, they still break. It's made by man. It's nowhere near as common as it used to be, but it can still happen. And You mentioned the whole, like, I just don't trust them. Well, this morning, a friend of mine sent me pictures from his agency's qualification shoot yesterday where somebody had the iron sights backing out of their gun.
Oh,
like
wow.
The iron sights were coming loose and falling out of the gun because iron sights never fail. Look, the stuff's made by man, right?
Yeah.
Regardless of what it is, it's going to break at some point.
True.
So.
Absolutely. Well, I'm thinking back to my situation. You know, there's that shock and surprise, and your first thought is that you've just lost the dot, which, you know, that was part of the transition training, getting to where you don't do this because that just slows you down. Why? I did that because I thought, well, I've lost it. And it's like, no, that dot is not there. So I will say the first time it happened to me was at 3-yard line, where we're doing like one-handed 2 shots and then, 2 shots and 2 shots. So what I did was something that you told me a long time ago is basically I had a giant aperture sight. Again, at 3 yards, you should be able just to kind of point. And that's pretty much what I did, but I actually used that aperture. I just framed the 10 ring and put them right in there, no problem.
Absolutely. As long as the glass is intact, great way to do it. You could have gone to the irons had you trained for it, and that's something we teach, right? Like, okay, dot's not there, tighten the hands, dot's still not there, go to the iron sights, right? Everything else is based on the window being obstructed and obscured, right? Because go to the back of irons first. If for whatever reason the glass isn't there, you can't see through it, then we start into the other stuff. But using the whole aperture, the whole shape of the optic as the rear sight's perfect.
Well, it worked for me. And then when I got back to 15, distance buys you a little bit of time. So when it happened to me again, I wasn't all that surprised. And that's when I remembered, backup iron sights. And again, I had kind of looked at them, but I'd never really drilled with this gun because it's a new gun to me. And they were down there and lined up, and things worked out for me. And again, at 15, you can miss at 15. A lot of cops have done it over the years. So the fact that I put them in there was not just blind luck. It was the fact that I used the sights. So when walk through those steps of what you teach of suddenly the optic is not there for whatever reason. Talk about that process the shooter should go through.
Yeah. First thing we have folks do just on the initial presentation is if you can't find the dot, just tighten both your hands, right? Tightening your hands up on your grip far more often than not will bring the dot into the window. You can go to work from there. If you do that and the dot's not there, or if the window's obstructed to where you can't see it, that's when you'll work into the other stuff. So first thing we do in classes when we get to this block of material is have them turn the dot off. Present the gun, look for the dot, it's not there. Go to your iron sights and shoot the problem with your iron sights like you would have normally. Okay. If that doesn't work, we'll show them how to ghost ring it, right? Do what you did. Use the whole glass window, putting that on what you're trying to hit, and fire the shots from there. Then other ways that we'll show people to do this, and this is an or thing, find out what works for you, is depending on the design of the optic, you might be able to use the top of the optic housing as an aiming point. Trijicon RMR is the best example of this. The owl ears that are on top of that optic, put them on the collarbone and fire your shots. Okay, you may have a little bit of elevation issue up or down, but the owl ears on that optic on the collarbone will let you hit. If you have an optic that has a flat top, like some of the Holosuns or the Bushnell RXS 250, you can put that flat spot across the base of the neck, across the collarbones, and work it the same way. If the shape of the optic housing doesn't work, like I'm a big fan of the aim points, but that kind of sort of curved top of the aim point doesn't lend itself to it that well, I use the slide plate cover. So I'm looking at what I'm trying to hit, usually the chest, present the pistol so I can see the slide plate cover or the hammer on a traditional gun on what I'm trying to hit the chest, and I'll fire my shots there, right? I'm looking basically through the gun at what I'm trying to hit. Both of those will work. The one that always strikes me as weird because it's odd for me, but the folks it works for, it works really well, is to roll the gun slightly inboard and sight down the track between the frame and the slide. Where I would normally tell people to keep their trigger finger and register, look right down that track and put that in the center of the chest and fire your shots from there.
Yeah.
Now, you need to shoot it so you know what the offset is, but it works.
Yeah, I recently heard of that technique, and I'm really intrigued, and I keep forgetting to check it out. But I will be taking another class next week, and hopefully get to try that out. So looking forward to that. Hopefully I'm not the only one. They'll be like, what are you doing? But no, it's supposedly some pretty good instruction. So I'm sure they'll know what's going on. So I got to say the suppressor height sights are dead sexy. They absolutely are. But do you really see any need for them at all if you're not using a suppressor?
I don't like them with an optic. I know I understand why people put them in there with an optic, especially because early on, they sat the optics sat so high that they were hard to see. We were talking about a pistol I've got right now, sent from a custom gunsmith that has them on there, and it's making it real hard to find a holster to use with that gun while I'm working with it. It's just they sit so big. I'd prefer something shorter. I really would.
Yeah. I had a totally random thought, which is not unusual for me, but I've not seen it yet, but I'm sure we will sometime soon. Is backup irons to the to the regular sights on a pistol. They make them for carbines, especially like the 45 angle ones that you can just can't, like you said. Somebody's going to come out with those for pistols, don't you think?
I hope not. Mostly because of holster compatibility and everything else. And okay, I'm going to diverge for a second. We were talking black guns in this morning's meeting. Somebody wanted to put pictures of this on the internet. They wanted to have a backup electronic sight to their rifle sight. So they had like a 1-to-6 low variable power optic on their rifle, and they went and got a little 1 power that was not an aim point from another manufacturer and put it out on the forearm of the rifle directly in front of the 6 power optic that they had on the gun, right? And I love the fact that some people in this community are snarky because one of the people went, wow, that's a really expensive 6 power magnifier you bought. No, the 1-to-6 is your primary sighting system. Don't obstruct it, right? Yeah. The red dot's your primary sighting system. Don't obstruct it.
Yeah, that's pretty funny. What are some of the other problems that you run into? You've already talked about occluded, and I've run into that sometimes fog, sometimes mud, or occasionally if you're living a really adventurous life, the glass might not even be there. But talk about some of those failures.
We've seen all of those. Glasses popped out of the windows on just about everybody's optic that I've seen.
Really?
One of the interesting ones is humidity that gets inside. And so this is going to be in one of the enclosed emitter optics, like the Holosun 509T, like the Aimpoint Acro, where for whatever reason they weren't sealed completely and moisture got inside of it. And that's going to down it. If that happens to you in an event, you're going to end up having to shoot that thing like we just talked about, using the outline of the optic, using the back of the slide plate cover, using the side of the slide, because that's not something that's going to go away momentarily. I've seen folks who insisted they didn't need an enclosed emitter optic go prone in a carbine class and have that open emitter optic scoop up a bunch of Mother Earth and block it.
Surprise!
That was fun. Rain is not as big of an issue. One of the things I'll do in classes, whether at Gun Center or on my own, is I bring out a squirt bottle and we squirt water on the optic, on the lens. Okay, go ahead and shoot it. Now you've seen what it does. Yeah. It doesn't take very long to solve that problem. Intermittent battery issues, battery failures. The one that's truly scary, and Dave Spalding brought this up recently, and it happened to me years ago, is when the dot loses 0 and you just don't notice it. Yeah. And all of a sudden your shots are going somewhere else. Now, the good news is as long as it's in the window, you're probably going to hit what you're aiming at. But if you have to deal with a very small target or a distance target, that might be problematic.
Yeah. Well, that's interesting you bring that up, and I wasn't necessarily going to go there, but what I did last night was I'd mounted a couple of new optics. I was kind of taking one of those evenings where you get the tools and the gear and I want to put this here and do that and blah, blah, blah. My new laser zeroing, what do you call it? There's a name for those things. And there's completely escaping me because I wasn't thinking about talking about them. But the things you stick in the barrel, they have a little arbor and let you set zero without shooting. And I got to thinking, I was thinking for scope mounting to get it somewhere close, so you don't have to do a lot of shooting to get it dialed in. I never thought about it with a red dot, and I did exactly that last night, and it seemed to help today. Unfortunately, I ran out of time. I had another couple of guns I wanted to test the zero on, but the thing is at 15 yards, an inch or two is close enough, essentially. But I seem to be, I had it dialed right in. So is that something you ever use? And it would seem to be a great way to periodically check zero if you can't get to the range.
Wheeler, and I can't remember their full name, but Wheeler something. They make one it has a magnet mount on it that you put it on the muzzle of an unloaded handgun, and it projects a laser, daytime visible laser. And when I say daytime visible, like in a room without the lights on, right? Yeah. But I'll take it into like a range shed where I've got maybe 10 yards. And if I'm concerned about where a student's hitting, right, like something just doesn't look right about where that dot is, I'll take it, slap it on, and check it. I can adjust the optic to where at least it's close to point of aim, point of impact. Yeah. Right. So that dot is sitting roughly where that laser sits. And I won't call it zeroed off of that, but it gives me a starting point for then getting them like, okay, is this you and your grip and trigger control, or is this that your optic was all cattywampus?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I really want to go out and do an actual test because every one of the guns that I felt were zeroed, they were off. One of them pretty significantly. So the gun I shot yesterday, I've actually shot quite a bit in a short period of time, and it seemed to dial in the groups a little bit better. If I remember before, it was shooting a little bit low, or it seemed to be, and I kind of chalked that up to either I didn't get the optics zeroed in good, or some of it may have been me and my grip. In my shooting technique, but seemed like those groups came up to where they should be. So I'm going to keep that thing handy, and one of these days I'll go out and test it before and after and see if that makes a big difference. But one other thing we were talking about when we were talking about problems, and I did this, I think, a year ago, I think at my qual, our range is situated east and west. And I remember this very vividly because it was middle September, which is close to the autumn solstice, which means the sun is square east and west. And we did it at 8 a.m. And at that time of year, where is the sun at 8 a.m. when you're facing east? It's just that far above the berm. And I quickly discovered that my optic, there was nothing wrong with it aside from old Sol was blasting in there, and then you had the reflection from the top of the gun. It made it pretty challenging, and I had to use some of the co-witness techniques to get anywhere on the target because it's just inherent in an optic. If you're looking into the sun, it's going to be a problem, but the pistol optic did tend to probably present a little bit more problem than a iron sight would, but it worked out just fine for me. But anything I should have done different there?
The only thing I would say that we talk about this, and when it pops up on the range, I try to let people see it with their stuff, is that false dot, that fake dot. I will tell people, give it a slight lateral movement of the gun. So just kind of like you're trying to twist the gun a little bit to the left, a little bit to the right, depending on what hand you shoot with. The real dot will move when you do that. The fake dot will stay where it was, right? So if I, as a right-handed shooter, if I give it a little left input, right, the sun, right, will stay there. The real dot will move to the left.
Good to know.
I've shot in Connecticut on an east-facing range in the wintertime in the morning, and had that sun come up and hit the Optic right somewhere between that kind of 11 and 1 range.
Yeah.
You're familiar with the ranges at Gunsight and the desert sun down there. Towards the end of the day, we've got a couple ranges that are hard west facing, and about 3:30 or so, we'll start to see a couple folks experiencing that false dot issue.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it kind of shocked me. I knew I was, I had my hat on and I was kind of grimacing into the sun. And as soon as I made my presentation, it's like, oh no, Houston, we have a problem here. So, but we talked enough about it at this point. I really need to take your red dot class. I'm kind of self-taught.
Yeah, you only got a day of it. You only
got
a day of it earlier this year. You should take the full week.
Yep. Well, it helped me, even though, I've told the story and we're kind of going off a different direction here, but that was before I really started carrying the red dot because I just still didn't feel comfortable. And I'd had, at that point, that was my second block of instruction, 8-hour instruction at Gunsight. I've talked to you a lot and other guys, and it just, for me, the test is when I'm doing dry presentations, if that dot isn't there, I don't feel comfortable carrying it in the street in the real deal. And what it took for me was all this instruction plus having a cleared firearm on my desk. And every time I got up from my desk, I would come back, same drill, check, make sure it's empty. And then I would do a number of presentations, 10 or 15. And I just did that over and over. And then one day, as you told me what happened, it's suddenly, oh, it's right there. How about that?
Yes.
And then I did it again and then again. And it was there pretty much every time. And that's not all that earth shattering because I've had that before. But what really got me is when I went this and it wasn't quite there, but I didn't have to do this. I just made a little adjustment and it was right there. Mm-hmm. And that's when I knew I was ready to carry it on the street, so to speak. So, again, I just, it's been eye-opening, using a pun, to see how it has changed my shooting. Because the old peepers, I hit 61 in a couple of days. So I know to some folks that's a mere sprout, and to others it's older than dirt and grandpa time put together. But my eyes are not what they used to be.
Even at my age, 61 is older than dirt.
Wow. And I invited you here. Really, this is my house. Come on.
You did invite me.
Oh, well, no, in all seriousness, it's a combination, especially at advanced age, when you stop and think, how many presentations have I made over my lifetime? Easily, I'm sure hundreds of thousands. And, I'm not a competitor or, some of these guys that, have really been shooting a lot. So it's hard to break old habits, but once you do, it really, I feel like I'm going to be comfortable carrying a gun for a long, long time now because I can see and hit what I need to hit if I ever need to. So with the requisite speed.
The folks that are new to shooting that are picking it up, I'd teach them on a gun with a dot. Right? Yeah. It's where it gets fun is for you, me, Ken, others who've been shooting iron sights forever. And we've gotten used to what we can get away with an iron-sighted presentation, and that's not quite the same way with a dot. We just got to put more work into it and repave that pathway.
Exactly. Well, Erick, good stuff. I knew it would be, even though we didn't really discuss this beforehand, but it was an opportunity. What do they call that? A teachable moment. So I thought we would throw that out and get your thoughts. So hopefully, gave the audience some things to think about if they're not a high-speed, low-drag operator on the red dot optic. So before we go real quick, you've got a lot of stuff going on. You are the editor of American Cop, which is now the official training partner with the Shooting, Hunting, Outdoor Trade Show. That's kind of a big deal within the industry. Talk briefly about that, of what you can talk about and what you know at this date.
So for the last several years, NSSF, via the SHOT Show, has been doing a thing they call the LEAP, Law Enforcement Education Program. And this year, American Cop's going to be their co-sponsor, co-host for that. It's a number of presentations that take place upstairs from SHOT. They're on subjects related to law enforcement. You have to be law enforcement to go to them. There's registration process required. This year, because we're helping to sponsor it, I'm going to be doing a couple of presentations. I'll be talking about ready positions and better outcomes, kind of through decision making, as well as training low light. So not just how to turn on the flashlight, but how law enforcement should be teaching it in light, pun intended, of the case law decisions and the direction given to us by the courts. Some of the things we do. I know there's going to be other presentations about magnified optics and long-range shooting for sniping. There'll be stuff on body armor. At least one company is going to be coming in and talking about range design and how range design can influence and support better training that's more appropriate for the environment that law enforcement finds itself in nowadays. Unfortunately, that program is law enforcement only, but that direction comes from NSSF, not us at American Cop. Teaching at Gunsight, I have my own company, Cougar Mountain Solutions, as well, teaching at several events, conferences, as well as my classes over the next year.
And how do they find out more about Gunsight and Cougar Mountain Solutions?
So Gunsight can always be reached at gunsight.com or hit any of the social media looking for Gunsight Academy. That would be Facebook, Instagram. I'm not sure about anywhere else. For Cougar Mountain Solutions, it's cougarmountainsolutions.com. Same thing will get you there on Facebook. And on Instagram, it's cougar_mountain_solution.
Perfect.
Plus AmericanCop.com, always for weekly articles.
There you go. And, I was sitting here openly smirking. It's low light, not low life training, right?
Yes. If I was a little bit garbled, yes, it is low light training.
You probably said it perfectly. I just heard low life training. And some of the stories, one of these days when we're all ready to just retire, we're going to tell some stories. Well, Erick, as I said, it seemed like a teachable moment. And of course, you, the consummate firearms instructor that you are and red dot expert, I appreciate you coming on to educate us about how we can do it better. So anyway, I appreciate it. And thanks for coming on the podcast again.
Thanks for having me. And to everybody who's taking the time to listen, Merry Christmas, Happy Hanukkah, Happy New Year.
Well, it was great talking to Erick Gelhaus about co-witnessing sights with your pistol-mounted optic, and I got to admit, I learned a thing or two along the way. Before we go, I'd like to remind you to check out our great sponsor, 4 Patriots. If you go to their website, which is the number 4, the word patriots.com, and type in /gunmag, you can see all the great deals exclusively for the Guns Magazine podcast audience for all your preparedness needs and supplies. That's 4patriots.com /gunmag. Well, that's it for this episode of the Guns Magazine podcast. On behalf of everybody here at FMG Publications, I'm Guns Magazine editor Brent Wheat, reminding you, now get out there and get shooting.